if you really are fed up, and I think it's looking that in the mirror, saying, oh, I'm so fed up, and then going about your day. Are you really though? Like, are you really that fed up if you're just going to go about your life and not actually do it? Or uh, can you be more fed up? So I think it's important to recognize whether or not you're being honest about that, really. And if you could be more involved, find a way that is practical for your life, that isn't damaging to your mental health.
Another day, another shooting, another chance to talk about a topic that is exhausting and painful. And I am tired. But you know what's more exhausting and tiresome? You know what wears me out even more? Is hearing those words, thoughts and prayers way too often. And even worse, knowing that it's from the aftermath of more murders and more gun violence. In 2018, I remember saying how tired I was of hearing those words even then. When I told my friend Kristina Filler, I will join her at the gun violence march in New York City. And it was shortly after the Parkland school shooting. Remember that one? And also 20 years after she lost her own father to gun violence in front of the school, murdered. Just like the hundreds of children, teachers, mothers, daughters, fathers, sons, brothers, and sisters that have been taken from us due to senseless gun violence. And you know what? I experienced that loss too. And I'm talking about it for the first time with Kristina and with you as she shares her story and what she's doing to make a difference. Because thoughts and prayers aren't doing it. It isn't enough. So on this episode of Holistically Speaking, I am holding space for Hold Your Fire and for my friend Kristina, who shares her story and how she's finding healing not only through humor, but activism and creativity. Hey, you know what? It's causing a shift. It's making a difference. Are you ready to make a difference too? Then take a listen. I have a lot of people on this podcast that I'm really fortunate to say that I've known for quite some time, and many friendships that I've made over the years. I'm happy for the new ones as well. But when I get to sit in the room, right, the podcast room, with people that have really touched, moved, and inspired me, I'm always so blessed, elated, and just opening the line of dialogue and having conversations is really important. And Kristina Filler, you are one of those people. I've known you for a number of years, and we met on the set of Daily Burn, and a friendship just grew from that. But there's a personal side to a connection we have. And in the recent events at Uvalde and just the time we've spent together on some things, I really want to hold space for you to share your story, your true activism, and where you are in this world. So thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here talking to you. And I really do appreciate the space, because I feel like, it's really hard to talk about topics that are so heart heavy like this. And, people don't want to after they're done, with the initial shock and the initial mourning. They just kind of want to box it up and put it away and move on. And it's important that we talk about it. It's important that it stays on our minds. I mean, that grief and taking that time is also healthy and important, but we also need to keep having these conversations, because if we just kind of let them go, I hate to say it, but that's what the NRA wants. They want to keep, funding their agenda, and they want us to forget, which we always do, which is why we're still in this loophole of these things happening. And, I don't want that. So I'm very grateful to be here talking to you. And we do have a history of this topic together. You and I both have been touched personally by gun violence, and we attended a march together, a protest march in, we think 2018, after the Parkland shooting. I mean, it's hard to remember. There's been too many shootings,
Yeah.
who can remember? But I know it was in a time when I first made Hold Your Fire, and you were very supportive of that. And we had a good time. I mean, I remember that time fondly, and it's just one of the ways that I try to find joy, as much as you can under these circumstances, but some kind of joy or personal satisfaction maybe is more accurate in activism, because otherwise we just can't handle it at length. And so I appreciate you doing that with me. That was a very big pivotal moment, and supporting Hold Your Fire all these years. I mean, it's been a thing now for 4 years. And
Yeah.
to give some background, Hold Your Fire is a t-shirt campaign that I started in 2018 in the aftermath of Parkland, in response to the confluence of Parkland colliding with the 20th year anniversary of my dad's murder by homicide. And it kind of blew up. I have so many supportive family and friends like you who promoted it, and I managed to get it linked on some various things. Some kind people, shared the link, and it has sold. I forget how many shirts it's sold, over 1,000, I think, and it's raised $12,000 as of this week for Everytown, which is an
Mm.
organization that fights the gun lobby. And yeah, it's been a crazy thing, especially because so when my dad was killed, he was killed in a homicide when I was 14 in 1998. I was an adolescent. Adolescents have their own way of thinking, and very heavy thinking in some cases, especially when you're an artsy person. I think you're in touch with
Mhm.
certain sides of your brain. And anyway, I didn't feel comfortable talking about it.
No, you mentioned that you weren't comfortable talking about it, and you started talking about it, which is part of the healing. So, yeah. And
It is. It is. I mean, it's sort of a be careful what you wish for, because gun violence has blown up so much in recent years that
mm,
it's on the tip of everybody's tongue. I mean, I feel like there was a stretch actually while we were at Daily Burn that I couldn't get away from it. I remember
mm,
going. It was when like the Vegas shooting had
mhm.
happened, and actually Paris was around then too, I think.
I think it was the Charlie.
And
Yep. Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. A few of them happened like right in a row, and this was leading up to Parkland. And I remember just going in there, and I was in the locker room, and Daily Burn is a show where you have to like be smiley and presentable.
Mm,
And I remember like getting my like Daily Burn like hat on, and getting my head in the game for doing a happy smiley workout. And I walk in the locker room, and there's this like doom and gloom from the latest shooting, and I just couldn't get away from it. And that was part of the like explosion in my brain of feeling like I needed to do something.
mm,
And because I just couldn't, I can't go about my day knowing that there are people all over the place going through what we went through, because it was awful. I mean, it just
mm.
was. And it's horrifying when it happens to anyone. It's a new level when it happens to children. I mean, it's so just inconceivable. And um, what was weird about this recent shooting is that I almost felt more triggered, not by my own history, but by living through Sandy Hook. I
Mhm.
remember when that news happened. I mean, I could not get out of bed for 2 days after that news story broke. I remember reading like little bits of the news, and then just like breaking down and going back to bed and crying some more.
Mm.
And to know that this went on 10 years later, that it's still going on, that it's getting worse, is so just, I think we all feel it. I feel like we all had the same kind of collective reaction, which was almost like, I can't even, like I
Mm.
just, there's nothing to say that's going to make this better. There's nothing, I feel like there's nothing to do. And so I'm going to maybe get pissed off about it, and I'm maybe going to, say some things about it, but I'm just going to kind of accept it, because clearly this is just life. And that's such a frustrating reality, and not one that I can deal with. Um,
Yeah, and to
so
just settle,
yeah,
to settle and just say, I guess this is the way it is just not the answer. right? It's like, what can I
No,
do?
no, it's not.
Um, and when you have the personal experience, and look, losing your father and me losing a friend. By the way, just so I've never shared this. That I've never shared this in a public open space, but my story is that I had a sorority sister who was shot in road rage while she was driving on a highway when I was in college. And I mean, I never had dealt with violence in my life before. And for that to happen on the college campus, and then for you with your story with your dad and happening right on the grounds. And then we're seeing these shootings with the kids and in the schools, and it seems like everything's surrounded in where should be the safest place these children, whether you're 5, 15, or 25, should be. And as a college professor, I have to take active shooting classes. This is where it gets ridiculous, and it's at a point where it's like, enough is enough, right? And
Hmm.
so we have our own personal
Yeah.
stories, and it's like, how do we make a difference so that we don't keep reliving this, whether you're a 5-year-old, 15-year-old, 25-year-old, or 50-year-old, right? So
Hmm.
what I love about you, Kristina, is that there's such a fun, whimsical side to you, and we see that in your artwork as well, right? That when you speak about what you're doing, you want to make activism what you say. I want it to be less of a drag and more fun, you know? And you really
Hmm.
do that. And I remember when we did that march, I mean, our signs were upbeat. Your shirt with the hold your fire is always upbeat. There might be there's little digs in some of the stuff you do, like when you're sending the letters, like you're doing a bunch of letters, or you're making an effort in advocacy, not in like a negative way. You do it in a way where it's like, come on, people, right? And it makes people look, because it's different than pounding the message in a negative way where it's like very passive aggressive and anger. Because we really don't get to people when we come from a place of anger.
I try to imagine what other people are feeling when they read the things that I write. And for example, if I read something that's doom and gloom and just like these depressing stats and that sort of stuff, my physical reaction is shut the laptop and go eat some ice cream, or something of that nature. And that's not productive. It's just not. And it's important to read the articles and know the facts and all of that stuff. And if you feel you're in a charged up, sort of headspace for it, where you've had your coffee, you're ready to like sit and take that stuff in, then look it up and read it and take it in. Or if you need those facts in order to act and be able to speak, from a space of knowing what the hell you're talking about. It's important to read those
Mhm.
things. But I just find that people tend to react a little more strongly when you know, make it in some way slightly enjoyable for them. And it's such a hard thing to spin though,
Mhm.
because this is such a depressing, awful reality. The events are just traumatic and triggering, no matter if you've been through it personally or not. We all have kids in our lives.
Mhm.
It's just a disgusting thing to think about them being murdered at school. It's horrendous. And but yeah, I mean, I do my best to spin it. I partly do that in memory of my dad, because my dad was a funny guy, and I like to think that he would appreciate that I try to add a little humor in what I'm doing. And so it's nice to draw some inspiration from him. But I also find that when I manage to find ways to use my strengths, my crafty side,
Mhm.
my humor side, I want to do it more. I enjoy the work. Or at least if I don't enjoy it, because it is, again, tough, I at least find it very therapeutic. For example, with those postcards, they had a sarcastic slant, to say the least. Um, I'll just give an example, since so that people know what I'm talking about if they haven't seen my post. But I wrote these postcards. They were nice, quote unquote, cards for senators, and the big message on them was a nice message, and there was sort of fine print on the bottom that was not so nice. And one of them, for example, said, "You're invited,"
Mhm.
in this big glittery, bubbly letter script, and which looks nice. And then on the bottom it said, "To 21
Mhm.
funerals." which is,
Mm.
I like to think, a nice little needle to, people who read that. They first see the card, their initial reaction is, "Ooh, what's this nice thing?" And then it's like, oh, you know. Um, and uh, let me tell you, playing with a bunch of glitter and glue when you are sad is very therapeutic. It's really nice. And I actually, just before we hopped on this call, was writing the inscriptions on the back so that I can mail them. And I also wrote similarly pointed language for the back, which I will share on social media. Because if I mean, my feeling is, if people want to copy it and send their own, then, I'm happy to sit around my house and do the deep thinking and do the crying if other people will amplify the voice. So, um,
And that's what it's all about, is paying it forward. I mean, whatever your take is on things, you're creating the work and it's part of your therapy.
mhm,
But if somebody sees that and they pay it forward and they're like, I want to jump on this bandwagon. I
mhm,
want to support this mission, or I want to support you and what you've been through, or I want to just put an end to something. And somebody didn't have to sit down with the glitter and the gold and do that. Maybe that wasn't part of their being,
yeah,
right? But
absolutely.
maybe you're expressing it in a way. Yeah, and you know what else about this? This is also something we could be teaching kids,
Mhm,
how to express themselves through art, how to express themselves in a way that's not violent.
mhm,
I had mentioned to you prior to recording that just 2 days prior to the shooting in Texas, I had just just wrapped a talk
mm,
on the healing power of touch and the importance of touch and putting social and emotional learning tools in schools, particularly with havening. And, you know, the fact that touch is essential, and also giving kids an outlet so that perhaps they go to a negative and violent
mhm,
space, but get in touch with their emotions and be able to talk about them, could lead the way for different outcomes if they know how to do that. And then similarly, it what we're allowing happen in this country with the availability of
mm.
firearms. Well, those two things together are toxic,
Oh, yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
So, yeah, so it's not you have the people that are like, "It's not the guns, it's the people and the mental health." And it's like, "That's fine. I get it." But there should be checks
Mhm.
on A, what's available, and also, uh, who it's available to.
Yeah. There's also plenty of stats to prove that wrong, though, because if you listen to Shannon Watts, who started Moms Demand Action, she pushes the point forward that every country has mental health issues, every single one. We are the
Mhm.
country with the guns,
Yeah.
and we are the country with the most deaths.
Mhm.
Like, it's in plain
Mhm.
sight in all the stats. The only difference between
Mhm.
us and other countries is that there's too much money behind the NRA. It's we're corrupt. That's the reason it keeps happening.
Mhm. So how do you see the difference happening, like with your postcards, with your shirts, which by the way, we're going to put a link in the podcast notes on how to get your hands on a Hold Your Fire t-shirt, or even I have a tank top. I love my tank top. I think my mom has a sweatshirt. I mean, they're great. And the design is beautiful and it's fun and whimsical with a really good message. It's not like in your face. That's what I love about it. The hand with the dove, and it's beautifully done and colorful. So it's a positive message with a real deep message. And so we'll put that in the notes. But if people want to get involved, how how can they do that? How do you see the change really happening? It's not just putting a t-shirt on and saying, "Oh, thoughts and prayers,"
Right.
which is I'm so freaking tired of the thoughts and
I
prayers.
know. I
Enough
know.
people, enough with the yes, have the thoughts and prayers, but what are we doing? What are we doing?
I mean, I hate to say it because nobody likes work. Nobody wants to hear that in order to see results, they need to put in the work. It's like diets. Nobody wants to do the work of a diet. They just want to snap their fingers and lose the weight? But the
Mhm,
reality is, unless you get all that fat lipoed off your body, you are going to have to put in the work in order to lose the weight. And it's the same with gun violence. If we want this to go away, we have to put in the work. And I know that nobody wants to hear that. And I know that everybody's busy and everybody's overwhelmed with all of the numerous tragedies of the world. But it's about deciding where your priorities lay. You know, we can't do everything. We can't save all of the world, you know, at once. It's about deciding if you really are fed up. And I think it's looking that in the mirror, you know, saying, oh, I'm so fed up, and then going about your day. Are you really though? Like, are you really that fed up if you're just going to go about your life and not actually do it? Or uh, can you be more fed up? You know? So I think it's
Mm.
important to recognize whether or not you're being honest about that, really. And if you could be more involved, find a way that is practical for your life, that isn't damaging to your mental health. There are plenty of ways, and I have a whole list of them that I plan on sharing in the coming hopefully days, maybe weeks. I have a kid, so sometimes things roll out a little slowly, but um, I've tried to come up with you know, quote unquote, fun or therapeutic ways to work these things into our lives. And because I know I understand that people are busy, and that, you know, I feel like people's memories of Vivaldi have already kind of gotten washed away with the holiday weekend. It's got to be a motivating factor. If you're not willing to do it for yourself, do it for these poor kids who are forced to go to school and face this fear. I mean, can you imagine? I mean,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
went through this trauma when I was a teenager, but I didn't have to worry about myself getting, you know, having to go through shooter drills and all that. And here's a fun fact that I learned recently that's really scary, is that little kids uh, in times of, I don't know if they receive these in the you know, shooter drills, but if there's an actual active shooter, they receive these comfort boxes to keep themselves occupied so that they stay quiet if there's a shooter in the building. And they have things like little toys in them to keep them occupied,
Mhm.
like fidgety kinds of toys. You know, they have a bottle of water and a snack and a letter from their mom and dad and a photo of their family to keep them calm. I mean, if that doesn't horrify you into wanting to get up off your butt and doing something, I mean, then consider yourself not that horrified and not that motivated because, uh, you know, I think it's just, yeah, I
Mhm.
think it's
Mhm.
just valuable in recognizing you know, what you need to get involved, because I think people sort of expect you know, other people, maybe people like me who've been through it, who are highly motivated, to, you know, cause a ruckus and do it for them. But the power is in numbers, man. I can't do it alone, obviously. Like, if I had bought all the hold your fire shirts I could afford, it wouldn't have been as many as that sold. You know, like, it takes a village. And that was real impact. You know, we raised 12 grand. I mean, that was everybody stepping up and going a little bit out of their comfort zone. A lot of those people who bought shirts had never bought an activist shirt before. You know, that was not something they were familiar with,
Yeah.
wearing it, let alone buying it. And that was a big deal. So, you know, I encourage you to, you know, if you don't know where to look, also, if you don't know where to start, because sometimes with these things, if you've never done it before, it's like, okay, well, I want to help. How do I help? You can text 644-33. It's Everytown's like automated bot text service that will let you know when they have events going on in your area. They'll let you know, if there's some specific call to action that needs to happen on a specific date. Maybe it's before a big vote, you know, to reach certain senators or whatever, in order to have a bigger impact. So that service is hugely useful, if nothing else. But I'll say also that getting personal with it really does help, because uh, you know, sending those automated things, totally, it's a good thing if you're signing those little emails, you know, that come to you and you're just like, yep, send, good, I did my good deed for the day, fine, that's something.
Mhm.
But if you go a step further, it has real impact, you know. So if you can manage it, you know, I totally get that it's a lot to ask in our modern world. You know, we've got a lot on our plates. But uh, I am fed up, and I can't handle children getting murdered. I just cannot do it. So that's why I'm going to put the time in to hopefully inspire some people, and we'll see what happens.
And for you, I think this takes this shooting specifically is different from the Parkland or Sandy Hook because you weren't a mom then. And I imagine there's a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
now
I
given
mean,
your
yeah.
daughter's not in school yet, but she's in daycare. She's out of your protection for
Hmm.
some period of time during the day. And I
Hmm.
mean, the conversations I have with people is exactly that. Like, I can only protect them, so I have to put my trust that they are in a safe space. I mean, we see the signs everywhere, and I just shared this in my talk.
Hmm.
We see those signs like safe haven, safe place to your kids could go, or place somebody can go if they don't feel safe. And one of those places you always see those yellow signs with the hands, that say safe haven, safe place, is a school. But if it's not a school or a house of worship or a hospital or like, then where is it? You know? And I think you make a really valid point
Right.
that especially being a parent, when my child walks out of this door, the last thing you want to be thinking is this the last time I'm going to see my child? Right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
because we're constantly living in fear. Or is this the last time I'm going to walk out this door? And I
Hmm.
think we're at this point where I I hope, and you mentioned this before about coming right out of a holiday and how the feeds have kind of died down. We're not hearing the magnitude of storytelling that we were hearing last week about Texas. And by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be 2 weeks after that. And now kids are out of school, the
Hmm.
summer's coming, so it's like that doesn't make it go away. There's somebody waiting in the wings for another opportunity to
Right.
do this, right? So when is enough enough? When is enough enough? And for you, like you said, it's not just buying the t-shirts. While that helps, it goes towards Everytown. What more can we do? And again, we'll provide that information during this podcast, which I want to say thank you to Kristina Filler, who is a dear friend of mine, who for joining, sharing her story about her personal experience with gun violence. And I can resonate with that as well, from losing somebody that I knew through gun violence. And it doesn't mean you have to have experienced it to be able to support the cause if you believe in it. You know, that's the big thing.
I also, yeah, on that note, I also want to point out that if anybody thinks that they haven't yet been affected by gun violence, I want to say that you have,
Mm.
because in the day after this shooting and in the day after all the other big shootings, everybody in America had something to say, had some thought. It was weighing on them in some way, some, you know, more deeply and for longer than others. And there is this giant ripple effect that isn't measured in the statistic of 21 people getting murdered, or I believe it was 10 in Buffalo, like that. It's taking a toll on all of us.
Mm.
And I was throwing an idea around with my husband yesterday. I usually give him my ideas first so he can tell me if I'm crazy or not. But I was talking to him about that ripple effect, and I was like, what would be interesting would be sending my bill for therapy to a senator, because I feel as though they are responsible for the fact that I am spending half of a therapy session telling my therapist how deeply this is affecting me. Shouldn't they have to pay for that? I mean, if we're really I mean, it makes sense.
Mm. Well, as a mental health practitioner, I I would back that. That is so much of what I'm hearing in it. I mean, we go into that state. Like, it's so much easier to be in a state of fight or flight than it is a state of peace, but it's easy to find your peace if you have the tools, right? But I hear so much more about that because my kids, are they safe? I'm scared, fear. Yeah. I mean, that's a really powerful move. It's a powerful move. Different.
Right?
It's
I
different.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. And that's the kind of thing I like to go for, because I feel like people are just so like, oh, I've heard a stat before, I've
Mm.
heard a story before. And it's like, you have to find a way to get through the cracks to people. And I feel like pointing out the fact that everybody in America has been affected by this. It is dragging you down.
Mm.
It is making your work slower. It is probably damaging your sex life. Who wants to have sex after they've been talking about a shooting all day? Like, think about all the ways that it is affecting you.
Mm.
Let that motivate you.
Mm.
So yeah, I hope that you, whoever's listening, think about what, uh, you know, what life could be like if you got those hours back, that time back with your therapist, that time back with your partner where you weren't sitting and crying and talking about this kind of stuff and worrying about it, all the wrinkles in your forehead that develop over, we care about those wrinkles, we don't want them, all the furrowed brows that happen
Mm.
over worrying about these kids, like, there are a lot of ways that it is affecting us that are all preventable.
Yeah.
They're all preventable. So, let it motivate you. Don't let it drag you down, and let's move forward together.
So powerful because you really hit the nail on the head because it is how many times do you want to have to check on your child in their bedroom after you put them down in bed because you're like, I just need to make sure that, you're not even thinking clearly. You're instantly in this place where you are in a panic mode because it has
Mm-hmm.
impacted us. Look, I mean, as a news anchor who was on air during 9/11 myself back then when I was full time in the news business, that impacted people for so long, and the trauma doesn't leave our bodies until we deal with it. But it's not so much about it. It is
Mm-hmm.
partially how do we deal with the trauma in our lives, right? Creating the tools and the ability to know how to deal with our emotions, but how do we make an impact in this world, specifically the country we're living in, that is our temple. I mean, this whole place is it should be our respite living in this country, right? But if we're feeling activated at every
Mm-hmm.
turn, what can we do to make this sanctuary that we live in better? Right. So we're not having those thoughts and those feelings and those emotions and habits that are created out of that negative action that happened. We can't live in a perfect utopia. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
that's not possible. That like, we can't have
Mm-hmm.
perfect, but we can certainly make an effort to create a safe space for ourselves as much as possible and those around us, you know? So
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
you mentioning that it doesn't have to just be someone who's experienced gun violence firsthand couldn't be any truer because we're all impacted by it,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the media
Yeah.
and social media. There's no way to get away from it. That's the problem. Yeah.
No. I try not to read the news. Like my husband, he was the first one to tell me about the shooting. And because it's so triggering, it takes me a few days to read anything about these shootings because I just, I need to be in the right frame of
Mm.
mind to take it in. So I let that knowledge first soak in. And then I sort of like you said, you can't avoid it. You scroll on your phone, you see
Yeah.
a headline or two, you see someone react. So you kind of start to get a little sense of what happened. I let that sink in. And then after a little while, I will read an article or two. And to give you an example of how this one affected me, I chose an article specifically because I didn't think it would be triggering. I chose a headline about how the cops didn't think that their reaction time was quick enough. And I thought, surely that's a safe-ish article for me to read about this. It'll give me some facts without me hearing the personal tragedies. I'll be able to handle it, right? And I read the whole article and I'm fine and I'm fine. And I read the whole thing and then I get to the bottom and there is a little like italicized blurb at the bottom that says, to send money to victims' families, make out a check payable to yada yada. And I meant to look up the info so that I could share it. Maybe you can link to it
Mhm.
um, after the fact. But I I started crying immediately when I saw that because after my dad passed away, they set up a scholarship fund so that me and my sisters could go to college. And I thought about all the nice things. People sent us fruit baskets. A little old lady read about our story in the news and sent my sisters and I $5 for ice cream. Uh, and I just sat and cried. And I just thought about we are one family that was affected. There are 21 families going through that right now, plus the 10 in Buffalo, plus all the ones before that, and plus the ones that are going to probably happen in between when you and I are chatting and when this airs. Um,
Hmm.
and they're real people. It's a lot. So, you know, uh, if you want another way to help, just supporting the victims is really helpful. I saw something about how the irony that a lot of the politicians are taking all this money from the NRA. Meanwhile, these families who are going through this are in sort of a, less affluent area. It's a lot probably for them to put on sudden funerals that they weren't expecting expenses from. So, you can give them support too. And let me tell you from my experience that it means a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and being really open and honest about that. Uh, the magnitude of loss, it cannot be measured. So any way you can be a support system, especially to these families, and obviously, like you said, this one happened right now. There could be another one,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so many ways we could support and help, and that go well beyond thoughts and prayers. You know,
Right.
and turning away, being like, all right, well, I don't have a child in school, so I mean, and not to say that I don't want to desensitize it, but hearing that from you as someone who has been a victim of losing a family member in that way, uh, I imagine that'll resonate with many, and you've had time to heal.
Mm-hmm.
I was just
Plenty of
going to
time.
say,
It's been
you've had
24
time,
years.
24 years, but I mean, the pain is there. The trauma still exists. The moments where the brain is, is activated and you're taken back to that day. I didn't lose my father to gun violence, but I lost my father almost 20 years ago. And there's still moments where I have extreme pain and loss just from loss. And you
Right.
amplify that when you put something violent with it, it still comes
Mm-hmm.
back. So for you,
Yeah.
the thought, the one thing, because I just know you as a person and you're such a spirited, joyful, fun, quirky, witty, there's so many things, there's so many words I would use to describe you. And was that really, like, when you started really using your artwork to express your message? I mean, what was the level of therapy that really created for you? And I know we touched on that a little bit, but I want to really touch on that, especially with Hold Your Fire, because took it really took off.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it did. I even got an email from Oprah's team at one point who were curious about featuring it. I mean, yeah, it took off bigger than I ever thought. I thought I was going to maybe raise $500. So, we raised 24 more times the amount that I had
Mhm.
initially set out for. Um, uh, Yeah, I mean, it was hugely therapeutic. So in the same vein of what I just said, where I take a few days to read the
Mhm.
articles, when after Parkland happened, I mean, it that one also really touched me deeply. I think because I was a teenager when I went through it, and these
Mhm.
teenagers who experienced Parkland, they were so raw in their public expression of what they were going through, which I really appreciated. Um, but it was hard to watch because it was like watching my own history. I knew what they were saying. I mean, it was different circumstances because it was a mass shooting versus a personal
Mhm.
one in our case. But um, it was. Uh, I took about, I don't know, a few days to a week, however long it was, before I said to myself, okay, I'm ready. And I was home alone one night, I remember, and I poured a glass of wine and I sat and I just read as long as I could read and watched as many clips as I could, and I just sat with it and I cried all I needed to cry. Uh and as I was doing that, that was when I sort of had uh this idea for Hold Your Fire, because I just really wanted to kind of like wave a white flag after I read those articles. It was just like, I please just stop, stop this. Like, it's
Mhm.
insanity,
Mhm.
And so that's why, the bird is hand shaped in sort of a stop sign sort of manner, and but it's also a piece of, and the Hold Your Fire message. It's not a divisive thing like no guns. It's just a, hey, please don't shoot me, please don't attack me, which I think is a pretty understandable and relatable message no matter what side you're on. um and so, yeah, it was hugely therapeutic, but it's also it's challenging. I feel like I've needed to pivot my message many times in order to keep reaching people, because there is such cynicism in this subject matter. And uh, I just don't want to lose people, you know? I lose myself sometimes. I'll be honest. Like,
Yeah.
I can't handle thinking about it all the time. It's hard. Um,
Mhm.
and you know, when these shootings happen, I am reminded of how I can't forget. I'm human too. You know, it's an uphill battle, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think using the pain for therapy is a way to keep yourself in it and to heal yourself, as you would say with your work. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, you know, even marching. Hey, marching is therapeutic. Marching burns calories too, which is an added benefit.
Hey, we had fun. We had
We
fun on that
did. We did have
march.
fun. Yeah.
I mean, you,
And
me,
you
and
know what?
Patrick, and there were a bunch of
There's,
people. It was a good time.
yeah. And we saw some celebs, I think. I feel like Paul McCartney was near us at one point. Pretty cool.
I forgot
I
about
saw
that.
Susan Sarandon and Julianne Moore at the last one that I went to. And you know, let me tell you, there's some clever signs there. If you just want some people watching and to see what how other people you know, use their pain in clever,
Mhm.
interesting ways. You can find some interesting reading material on the signs for sure. And making a sign is also therapeutic, I think, personally.
Yeah.
Um,
And the other thing about that is it's power in numbers, power in community. Like power in numbers, you said before,
mhm,
but community can make a big difference. And that's how we
mhm.
met, you know, in a sense of
Yeah,
community. And it's amazing when you see people coming together for something that is an advocacy for good. But then like you
mhm.
mentioned, the creative. We were walking around looking at signs, and I was like, "Oh, that's funny. That's a good play on words," because I love a
Yeah,
good wordplay,
yeah.
and you're the
Uh-huh.
artistic side. So we were actually, even though the pain was there that brought us there, the outgoing support and just there, it was just like it was really a like a parade of positivity, but using
Mhm,
our grief to like elevate it, you know, propel it.
mhm.
So I have to say, I mean, that there is something about that that can make it, if as long as there's no violence. I mean, you're obviously not going to go
Right.
to that kind of thing for violence, but
Mhm.
it was so therapeutic just in the whole feel of community and connection, and humor existed and laughing. And you have to, there's laughter in the lessons, there's healing, there's humor in the healing. And I think you really are an example of that. Definitely. Definitely.
Oh, thank you. I
So,
try to be.
yeah.
Yeah, if you want a natural high, I think going to one of those protests really, I feel like you walk away from it just like buzzing with this good vibe energy, because it just gives you, I think, a hope again in humanity. You know, you're around all like well-meaning people who want to protect each other, and I think it's something that people don't expect, and something that's worth sharing.
Yeah, I think so too. So, just a reminder to our listeners, Kristina Filler's here on this podcast, sharing her story, sharing her advocacy about gun violence, what we can do, making a difference, hold your fire, which is a really powerful cause. I will put everything in the notes. If you want to share that article with me too, I will put that in the notes as well that you mentioned before. And then, you know, just see how you can make a difference. You know, it's throwing back that one starfish, like I always say. You don't have to save every starfish, but throwing one back makes a difference to that one. And that's what changes the ecosystem, people. That's what changes the ecosystem. So be the starfish, be
Absolutely.
the guy that throws back the starfish, you know. But on that note, what
Hmm.
I'd love to do is let's have a little fun, because I know you well enough to know you love fun. and so let's do a little wordplay, and I'm going to throw out a word, and I want you to just come back with the first word that comes to mind, and don't think too much about it. And we've played some games in our past, board games and things like that. So this should be fun, Kristina Filler style. All right, you ready?
Hmm.
She's like deep thinking. All right. Art.
I'm nervous. I don't want to let you
No,
down.
it's all good. It's all good. Okay, here we go. Art,
Creativity,
activism,
power,
grief,
healing,
hmm, guns,
Ooh, unnecessary.
Hmm. Hold your fire. I know it's 3 words, but
Inspiration,
mom.
warrior.
Hmm. Yeah, girl. And this one I'm going to end on because, yes, chocolate.
Yum.
Because I know you love the chocolate. In fact, she put in her bio notes, I have to share this artist, activist, and chocolate hoarder. And I think I'm aware of that because every time I'd be at your apartment, you always had like really good chocolate.
I mean, it's what keeps me going. Talk about needing, I don't know, finding motivation to keep moving. It's not an emotional motivation, but it is a practical, physical one.
Definitely. Definitely. So, on that note, what I want to do is I would love for you to just share with listeners. What would you like to leave with us, listeners?
Man. Well, again, text 644-33 if you want to get involved. If you want more ways to get involved, feel free to message me. I will give you some. My Instagram is at kstar810. I will happily share with you a list of things you can do. I hope to publicize some, hopefully by the time this is up. Uh, and just don't let it get you too down. Yes, what has happened recently was horrible. Yes, the world is broken, our political system is a mess, but I don't know, call me naive, call me crazy. I believe that we can find a way through all that, and we can um, change it. And that's coming from, someone who's lost. So if I can believe, I feel like other people can believe. And what I will leave you with also is, um, I listened to recently, Shannon Watts was on an episode of Glennon Doyle's podcast, who I love. And she pointed out that, actually, I can't remember if it was her that pointed it out or one of the hosts, but somebody pointed out that women's rights was a 100-year fight. Civil rights was a 100-year fight. And we have not been fighting for this that long. We may have a long way to go. So, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So I know that can sound daunting, but people run marathons. They find a way. They have their coping mechanisms. They have their little funny shorts. They find ways to get through it. So find your funny shorts in this battle, and get in it.
Find your funny shorts. I love that. That's so you to say that.
I haven't actually run a marathon. I just assume they have funny shorts, like bicyclists have funny shorts,
Yeah,
like you don't want to chafe.
they are
So
pretty
you don't
funny
want to chafe.
shorts.
Yeah.
That's so funny. But that comment is just so you. You're going to find a way to put that on a piece of artwork. I have this feeling like suddenly the
I'm going to
wheels
sell
are
shorts. Hold your
right.
fire,
Oh my God,
non-chafing shorts.
that'd be amazing.
People can march in.
That is funny. Come on now. I think we just came up with something. Like right on the rear end, like the two hands with the hands with the peace dove on the rear end. That come on now. Oh my gosh.
So funny.
If that happens, you heard it here first, everybody. If not, you have the availability to get an incredible t-shirt or tank top. Or are you still doing the sweatshirts as well?
I'm gonna get those made.
Oh, please do.
Yeah,
I will wear them.
I am. I not only am I going to get them made, I'm going to send them to senators.
Yeah, like the little, the tiny ones from like the 1970s that they used to have to wear with the high socks.
No one needs to see Mitch McConnell in those. No, I won't do that. But I will try to find a way to make them so other people can wear them. No, brilliant. Yeah, you can. The shirts are still available. They are printed on demand, so get as many as you want, as you need. People seem to like them, thankfully.
Yeah, they're great.
And in the last week, we have raised another, I think it was about $1,000 for Everytown. So every bit helps.
Yeah.
And yeah, we should keep it rolling.
And I should have asked earlier, just I know this is later in our conversation, but people can look this up as well. But briefly, like, where would the money go to? What is Everytown going to do with the money?
So, Everytown is the biggest organization that battles the gun lobby, the NRA.
Mhm.
So, the NRA is this just unstoppable force. They have so much money. And unfortunately, in our political system, it is really helpful to have money to fight money with. So, yeah, they have a variety of ways you can go on their
Mhm.
website. I want to say it's everytown
I'll put it up
dot
there.
com
Don't
or
worry
dot
about it.
org. I
Yeah.
don't know, but for sure you
Yeah.
can find it.
Yeah. We'll put it up
Um,
there.
yeah, yeah, and they fight the gun lobby in a plethora of ways. They've also partnered with Moms Demand Action, which is
Mm.
the biggest grassroots movement of civilians, largely moms, but everybody who also protest, and they are at state houses all the time
Mhm.
trying to get the attention of lawmakers and trying to change their minds.
Yeah.
So they're doing a ton more than anybody else, as far as I know. But there are plenty of other great organizations
Yeah.
that you can, look up to if you prefer someone else. I know there's the Brady Campaign, Gifford,
Mhm.
uh, Sandy Hook, Promise, plenty. Oh, and March for Our Lives, of course. So, there's
And
lots of them
even
doing great things.
even the Choose Love movement, which was started by Scarlett
Yes.
Lewis, who has been a
Hmm.
guest, and I'm an ambassador of that program as well. Like, anything you can do, you'd be
Hmm.
surprised on how you can get involved with organizations on a small scale, on a larger scale. Just do your part to make the difference, as we've expressed a
Hmm.
lot of different ways. Oh, my dear friend, it has been a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for sharing your light and your humor, and ending it on Find Your Funny Shorts. Just like, so just is like a perfect example of who you are, finding that humor in the healing. So
I'm glad that that is my physical representation is a funny pair of
please make
spandex
those,
shorts or
please.
whatever. I'm gonna Google it right after we get off this
I
call.
have no doubt you are. Like, by the time this thing drops next week, there'll be like a new featured item that you can buy on Hold Your Fire. It's so you to
So
do it.
funny.
All right. Thank you so much, and you're a joy and a pleasure, and I'm really honored to know you.
Oh, thank you. Same to you. My God, I'm so grateful to know you and have you in my life. You've been such a positive influence on me, and thank you for doing this, for helping people in so many ways, not just on this topic. For years now. My God, you've been doing this podcast for a long time.
Yeah, 2
and
years.
yeah, it's amazing. So kudos, and thank you.
Thank you. If you're interested in purchasing a Hold Your Fire shirt, or hopefully one of those funny shorts that we talked about, you can check out the link to Everytown and their page at bonfire.com. I shared the actual link, as well as how you can get in touch with Kristina on the podcast page. Of course, Kristina also shared that you can text 644-33 to receive actionable text alerts from Everytown. It makes activism easy and practical. You can also make a difference by sharing this podcast with just one other person in the fight against gun violence. Just pay it forward. And while you're at it, subscribe so you never miss an episode. We're doing good here at Holistically Speaking, and I want you to be a part of it. Holistically Speaking is edited by David Seiss, with music by Lipbone Redding, and recorded on Squadcast. Be safe, my friend. Hold your children tighter. Make a difference to end gun violence. And as always, be kind to your mind and to others. And don't forget to laugh.